Yeah, the playoffs either start this week or next week, depending on if your commissioner set it up correctly. Cannot believe we made it this far. Let's dive into the running back rankings and let's take down these championships. Starting off with the S tier, I'm going to still have Jonathan Taylor here at the 1 spot. Now, I will say I'm concerned about a lot of different things. One, I'm concerned about the schedule he has going into the future. You have to play the Niners, and Week 15 obviously is coming off of 2 very tough matchups against the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans over the past 2 weeks. Second thing I'm concerned with is the Daniel Jones fibula injury, limiting his mobility and possibly capping the overall upside of this Indianapolis Colts offense. Now, the reason I am still going to put Taylor at 1 is 1, he's averaging about 25 points per game, and 2, you don't have to deal with the Week 14 bye. I went ahead and on the premiere for Sunday night's video, I threw out a YouTube poll because I needed to see what's going on in your own leagues, and I asked y'all, when do your playoffs start? Week 14, Week 15, or Week 16? And if your league commissioner set it up correctly, should be Week 15. You should play your playoffs weeks 15, 16, 17. 66% of y'all said Week 15, but 28% of y'all said that your playoffs start in Week 14. And if that's you, I would prefer Taylor over McCaffrey, who has to deal with the Week 14 bye. Now, obviously, if you are currently sitting with the best record in your league and you're like, Mason, man, I don't really need to worry about this until Week 16 and Week 17. I have a bye week myself. Then who cares, right? But getting the extra game out of Taylor over McCaffrey is going to be a pretty big deal. Then looking at Jahmyr Gibbs, he is going to remain an S-tier running back despite only scoring 11 fantasy points this past week because now you have Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown injured. So for me, I would assume that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be getting leaned on heavily as a receiver, where we have seen 24 targets over the past 3 weeks. He may have a McCaffrey level workload with more juice. Then going over to A tier, we're going to have Bijan right here. If it wasn't for Tyler Algier vulturing rushing touchdowns, you could put Bijan Robinson way higher than this. He's been absolutely incredible. He does have a really tough matchup this upcoming week against the Seattle Seahawks. He's a tough one against the Los Angeles Rams in Week 17. But with Bijan, again, averaging 21 points per game, obviously locked and loaded top 5 running back. Achan's averaging just as many points per game, and Achan actually has some pretty favorable matchups, and he has given you an incredible floor. Even this past week, where he had 0 receiving yards for, I want to say, the first time in his NFL career. Not first time in his career, but pretty damn close. He's still at 19.5 fantasy points. He hasn't scored fewer than 12 points all season. So really like him. Plus love the matchups. Moving over to our next name, we are going to have James Cook. James Cook coming off a game where Allen couldn't throw the ball with both offensive tackles injured in Buffalo. So they had to lean on him heavily. And honestly, this may be their game plan going into the future. If you're looking at the amount of carries per game that James Cook's had, it's insane. He's averaging over 100 rushing yards per game so far this season. Now, I will say he has a brutal stretch of games for the fantasy playoffs. Have to play at New England in Week 15, at Cleveland in Week 16, and then against the Eagles in Week 17. Absolutely brutal. Then Josh Jacobs will be our next name. Honestly, if we're looking at the schedules, Jacobs doesn't have that easy of a schedule either. He has to play at Denver in Week 15. And honestly, it may not be the easiest thing in the world to play against the Chicago Bears at this point. And with Jacobs, I understand it was very ugly for his fantasy output on Thanksgiving, but it was a short week coming off an injury. Now that he's had 10 days rest, I'm assuming that he's going to be closer to 100%. And then honestly, if we are really going to consider the schedules that these players have remaining, I may have to put Bucky Irving ahead of some of these names. Bucky Irving over the next 4 weeks gets New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, and Miami. Tampa's probably going to be favored in every single one of these games. And again, we go back and we look at the James Cook schedule, and it is just absolutely brutal. Bucky Irving came in, had almost every single carry for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers his first week back. Now, of course, the receiving usage wasn't great. He only had 2 receptions for 20 receiving yards. But you go back to the first month of this year, he was sitting here averaging 5 targets a game, so I don't necessarily think that's going to be too big of a concern. So I think he's going to get used as a receiver a ton. I think the schedule is very favorable, and he's going to expand his role. So again, if you wanted to put Bucky at the top of this tier, I'm not going to fault you, and maybe an adjustment I make myself. Now, going over to C tier, we are going to have Javonte Williams. The fantasy points haven't been that great over the past 4 weeks. Like, he hasn't cracked 20 fantasy points since week 5, but it's a good offense, and he has 20 opportunities every single week. And for that reason, it's going to be hard for me to get away from him. He's averaging 18 carries a game and 4 targets a game. He's averaging 22 opportunities a game in a good offense. Schedule going into the future is at Detroit versus Minnesota versus Los Angeles, and then against Washington. Derrick Henry will be our next running back. Despite Lamar Jackson being god-awful, Derrick Henry's been great over the past 3 weeks. Over the past 3 weeks, he's been a top 10 running back every week. And if we look at the matchups, some good ones, some bad ones. Obviously, the matchup against New England's going to be tough. The matchup against Green Bay is going to be tough. But you get Cincinnati in week 15, which should be the first week of your playoffs. But you know who Derrick Henry is, right? You're banking on a touchdown. The touchdown's not there. Fantasy production's going to be bad just because he won't catch the ball. Then Kyren Williams will be the last running back in this tier. And honestly, I may have to move Kyren Williams down if we're going to be honest. The receiving volume has fallen dramatically. Kyren Williams has not had more than 2 receptions since week 5. So with the receiving volume falling, and then obviously Blake Corum expanding his own role, I think another adjustment we're going to have to make to these rankings is I have to move Kyren below some of these other names like, hell, Chase Brown, now that you have Burrow back, I mean, is in a very good offense. Chase Brown over the past 5 games has been incredible. So yeah, I would rather have Chase Brown at this point. Like, the matchups in Miami week 16 looks great. Against the Cardinals week 17 looks great. So yeah, we'll move Chase Brown up a spot. I will say with Trevion Henderson, super excited to see what he does tonight. Obviously, it's very difficult for me to rank him. You do have to deal with the week 14 bye for Henderson as well. Now, if we're looking at expectations for tonight's game, he's currently higher, lower, 82.5 total yards on Underdog Fantasy. Obviously, if you want to check out that projection or any other projection, link to Underdog Fantasy is always in the description. It's in the comment section. If you use code FLOCK, you'll get $100 added to your account after you play your first 5. You'll get a Gimme Drake May pick, higher, lower, half a total yard, and you'll get free questions that you can ask me in the live streams. Now, moving over to Amari and Hampton. I actually thought Amari and Hampton was going to play this past week being back at practice. Obviously, that did not happen. Is it the end of the world? No, but one thing that's going to be very relevant, and honestly, I may need to move Amari Hampton down dependent on the Justin Herbert injury. If you have Trey Lance under center, I'm going to be less excited about Amari Hampton, just given the fact that the overall offensive output will be dramatically lower, especially when we're looking at the trips to the red zone. If we're talking matchups here, it's not great either. You play Philly this week. You get Kansas City in week 15. You get Houston in week 17. Dallas is still a bad defense in my mind, but obviously they are improved in week 16. So I'm actually going to move Amari Hampton down a spot. I think I'd rather have Barkley and I'd rather have Genty because of the tough schedule at the same time because of the Herbert injury. I have Saquon Barkley on my own team. He's my running back 2 behind Josh Jacobs. And he's been horrendous. He has 1 game this year with more than 20 fantasy points. It's been a disaster from the very beginning. The efficiency's gone. The only hope that we have is this offensive line gets healthier. I know their right tackle saying that he'll probably be back in a couple weeks. For me, I've already locked in the bye for my fantasy playoffs, so I'm really just looking at week 16 and 17 against Washington and Buffalo. It's not the worst matchups in the world. And then with Ashton Genty, garbage offense, right? But now that you have no Chip Kelly, he had 8 targets this past week, which is right in line with what he's had over the past 3 weeks. Honestly, the receiving usage has been extremely compelling now that we look at this. He's had at least 5 targets every game since the bye. And over the past 3 games, he's had 8 targets a contest. Now, the efficiency is god-awful. Like right now, he's averaging 3.5 yards per attempt. 4.5 yards per target. Obviously, a lot of this can get blamed on the offensive line, but that's not getting any better anytime soon. Now, moving down to our next tier, we're going to have Travis Etienne leading us off. With Etienne, super disappointing day this past week against the Tennessee Titans. I don't necessarily think that you should overreact too much. I mean, it's about the same thing that we've seen over the past month, right? Byshell Tutin's going to be involved to an extent. with Travis Etienne kind of going to be a touchdown or bust running back because he's not going to have an incredible skill set as a receiver. At least he hasn't been used that way so far this year. Only 2+ games with 20+ receiving yards. So he had a nice little stretch. I will say matchup wise, you get Indy, the Jets, the Broncos, and then Indy again in week 17. Breece Hall is on my own fantasy team. I'm going to continue to throw him out there. I'm hoping that he starts drawing a few more targets because he's actually been very efficient as a receiver so far this season. Averaging 7.9 yards per target is absolutely incredible for a running back. And if you look at the underlying snap data, he's playing at least 70% of the snaps every single week for the New York Jets. And the matchups upcoming aren't bad. You get Miami, then Jacksonville, then New Orleans. I don't love week 17, New England. But yeah, talented running back, garbage offense. Can say the same thing about Quinshon Judkins. Talented running back, garbage offense. Again, difference between these two backs for me will be that Judkins doesn't have the receiving upside that you're going to get with Breece. I sadly had to nuke Rico Dowdle in these rankings, as you can tell. I mean, I had Rico Dowdle, I want to say, up as a B tier running back, or at least a C tier running back coming into this past week. But now back-to-back games with the Chuba Hubbard role. What we saw with the usage this past week against the Rams was on first and second downs. It was a 50-50 coin flip of who was going to be out there between Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard. But on third downs, you actually had Chuba Hubbard as the back. So super frustrating. I would still give the benefit of the doubt to Rico Dowdle. But again, he is falling like a rock in these, as you can tell. RJ Harvey this past week against Washington looked super good. We do have the report saying that J.K. Dobbins could potentially be back this season. But when those reports come out, I kind of read it as, oh, he may be back this year for the Broncos, but he's not going to be back for the fantasy season. I think it's RJ Harvey's backfield the rest of the way. Pretty good team as well. So not much to discuss. Jaylen Warren is the starting running back for Pittsburgh, but this is a garbage team. And at the same time, Jaylen Warren isn't that great of a running back, in my opinion. I mean, if we're talking fantasy upside specifically, again, I just love going back to the fact that he has had 0 games this year where he has scored 20+ fantasy points. Yep, 0 games. Now, moving over to our next tier, we are going to have Kenneth Walker leading us off. With Kenneth Walker, it's very difficult to rank him because, again, I would say his standalone value with Zach Charbonnet there is not great, but his contingent value is where if Charbonnet were to get injured, Kenneth Walker becomes probably a league winner. But, I mean, Charbonnet is a thorn in his side until we see otherwise. With Trey Benson, very difficult to rank him, not knowing what the utilization is going to be. I'm assuming he's coming back this week, and my best ball teams really want him back. But I will say we have a couple tough matchups coming up. You get the Rams this week, and then get Houston in week 15. Then Tyron Tracy will be our next back. We'll see what Tracy does in the game tonight, but expectations are not a great running back, not a great offense. Devin Singletary, a thorn in the side. Woody Marks, I actually need to move lower than this. Every single week, this dude gets all the opportunities. He had 20 opportunities this past week, 17 the week prior, 19 the week before that, 17 the week before that. But he has scored 20 fantasy points once this season, and that was back in week 4. So, yeah, not looking great for Woody Marks. And then I honestly may need to move the Chicago guys ahead of him. I mean, with DeAndre Swift, he looks like he is losing ground to Kyle Monangai. Kyle Monangai looks great, but this is a really good Chicago Bears team. This is a Chicago Bears team that's going to be looking to run the ball near the end of the season. We know how the weather gets in that stadium in Chicago. Now, I will say a big hesitation that I'm going to have with these Bears, and you can see I have them ranked pretty low in comparison to where I think a lot of people would want them, is if you look at the rest of their schedule, they get Green Bay in week 14, then Cleveland in week 15, then Green Bay again in week 16. So it is about to be a brutal 3-game stretch for these two running backs. And they both smashed this past week, but I'm a little bit concerned that they're going to kind of turn into the Seattle RBs, and that if one of them were to go down, the other may turn into a league winner. But if they're both healthy, then they're just eating away from each other. Now, our next tier is going to be led off with David Montgomery. Montgomery, you can start him if you're absolutely desperate, but again, he's just the most premium handcuff back. If you were to get an injury to Gibbs, he is a league winner. Same thing with Charbonnet. If you were to get an injury to Kenneth Walker, he's a league winner, but you never really want to start Charbonnet. Devin Neal and Jordan Mason are technically starting running backs in their own backfields at the moment. Devin Neal's usage looked phenomenal this past week, especially as a receiver. He had pretty much every single snap out there, but the Saints offense is garbage, and it's not like Kamara is guaranteed to be out the rest of the season. And then with Jordan Mason, I would say that the Minnesota Vikings offense is even worse than the Saints at this point. But the Aaron Jones shoulder injury, based on his reaction on the sideline when it happened, I would assume Aaron Jones isn't coming back this year, or at least not for this fantasy season. Now, of course, I'm going to be live streaming, updating these literally every single day. So if we get Aaron Jones news where he's A-okay, good to go, we'll go ahead and update the rankings on the site as we always do. Very similar to last week, I ranked Ashton Genty too low in these rankings because I thought he was going to be missing time with the ankle. Turns out I was wrong, so we had to go ahead and move him up in the middle of the week. Now, moving over to our H tier, we kind of have some handcuff level running backs. We'll lead it off with Kareem Hunt. Or honestly, Kareem Hunt should be in the tier above because even with Pacheco coming back this past week, Kareem Hunt still had the volume. He still had 16 opportunities against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, of course, did he do anything with it? Nope. You have no big play upside with Kareem Hunt at this point. No receiving skill set. You're just praying for a touchdown. Kenneth Gainwell, you can start him if you're extremely desperate, but again, you're more so just hoping that Jaylen Warren goes down if you have Gainwell and then he turns into a league winner. Kamara wasn't startable when he was fully healthy, and Devin Neal was literally nothing, so I don't see how Kamara ever is startable again in fantasy. Kamani Vidal, honestly, I'm going to move ahead of Kamara because there's a world in which Kamani Vidal is startable, and that's, Maureen Hampton actually misses more time than we thought, but my expectations, honestly, are probably Maureen Hampton comes back this next week. Tyler Algier and Blake Corum are really nice handcuff running backs to have because if the starter were to go down in front of them, they probably don't split the backfield. They probably just take it all to themselves. But honestly, as we look at this, I probably need to move Chuba Hubbard even higher than this because Hubbard may have some standalone value at this point, as sad as that is to admit, now that he has taken this backfield back from Rico Dowdle. And then with Emmanuel Wilson, handcuff running back to Jacobs. We already saw that if Jacobs were to go down, Emmanuel Wilson smashes. But I think that's all I got for you. Really appreciate you. Of course, if you want to check out any of those projections on Underdog Fantasy, links in the description, comment section. Code FLOCK gets you $100 added to your account after you play your first 5. And on top of that, you will get a Gimme Drake May pick, higher, lower, half a total yard for tonight's game, and free questions you can ask me in the live streams. But I appreciate you, and I really hope you get to see you in the live stream later tonight.